So it's been a little longer than I would have liked since I started the Perfect Grade project. I originally did the unboxing of the RX-78, which you can see back there in the center of the shelf. I originally did that back in February. I kind of wanted to get these going a little more quickly than that. I kind of wanted to do one a month for this entire year, and got a little sidelined because these were out of stock everywhere for a while. Yeah, I could not get my hands on either Zaku for a couple of months. At least not for any kind of reasonable price. If I went on eBay or Amazon, I probably could have gotten them for 50% above retail. But wasn't about to do that. Yeah, Hobby Link Japan and Hobby Search, my two best resources for inexpensive kits, both were out of stock until around the middle of April. And by that point, I was waiting on a couple more things, and it just kept dragging and dragging and dragging, and I just wasn't able to get them in hand until just the other day. So, yeah. So this is... I still can't get over the size of these boxes. I mean, this is a 20-year-old model. This literally came out in, like, I think April of, if I remember correctly, April of 1999. And I still am astonished at the size of these boxes. This is the mass production type, the green Zaku, the MS-06F. This is far from my first of one of these. In fact, I think I've built two of each of the Zakus so far before. I have two Shaw and two mass-produced types before, but I only have one on display. I think all the other ones have either gotten wrecked or gotten lost or just damaged beyond salvageability. The irony being that the one that I have on display is severely battle damaged, but that was by design. I'll throw some pictures in if I can remember to, but that's one of my favorite models I've ever done. It was kind of inspired by a Zaku featured in one of the later episodes of the 8th MS team, which was carrying a Fedi-type shield, was missing some shoulder armor, and was just overall really the worse for wear. So I kind of took that to an extreme and did some major modifications to the armor, did some serious battle damage to it, and basically rebuilt the rifle. Converted it from the standard drum fed to kind of more of a box magazine fed. Removed the forward aiming handle, the scope, kind of stripped it down, made it look lighter, and I really like that. I really like what I did with that thing. I did that. I think I did that model back in 2002 or 2003, and it's still one of my favorites that I have on display. I did one of my favorite little tricks that I've done with a Perfect Grade to make it kind of have a little bit of character is its finger broke. One of the fingers actually snapped at the second knuckle. So I took a little piece of wire, glued it up inside, and it looks like broken cables and tendons and cooling and stuff. And it just looks like the finger is broken, and I really dig it. I've always liked doing that. I've done that with a few Perfect Grades and a couple of Master Grades even. It's just a neat way to give a little bit of character to your battle damage. But we're going to take a look, starting with the green Zaku, and then probably in a few days I'm going to have up the MS-06S Shaw's red type Zaku. And we're going to see just what we got in this thing, because this is a big box, and I remember these being a lot of fun. So, yeah. So we'll start off, we got just a very basic box, very much like the Perfect Grade RX-78, which was in blue. This one is in kind of a dark forest green, MS-06F, Zaku 2, nicely embossed printing. Model number, height, weight, armor material, titanium alloy and ceramic hybrid armor. Generator output, thruster generator thruster general output, and weapons. Your Zaku machine gun and heat hawk. Box side, just some technical information, mostly what's already on the other side, on the top of the box. That's about it. Sides, nothing. Other side, some more technical information about the specific model. It's all in Japanese, but you can kind of get an idea. So this would be the height, width across the shoulders, width from front to back, presumably, unarmed weight, armed weight, number of parts, LED screws, etc., etc., etc. And barcode, 12,000 yen, original retail. Got it on HobbyLink Japan for a little over 10 because they're selling on sale now. And then your materials: polystyrene, polyurethane, ABS, PP, not sure, and PVC. So very much like the Perfect Grade RX-78, you got your box divided into 3 sections with a kind of a standard size master grade kit box in the center. So we're going to get started over here. Starting with the D runner, this is all torso armors. I think this is the only runner that's in this color. So you got your front, side, and rear skirts, you got your waist, you got some opening panels on the chest, you got the center codpiece, and then the hub for the cables, and then the side panels for the upper chest. It's kind of a dark green. Not a lot of panel lines on the front. There's a panel line down the side here, panel line right here, and some on the chest plate, but none on the front or rear skirts. Which I remember being kind of a disappointment when the first time I built one of these, because I had done a couple of the Master Grade Zakus, which had a ton of panel lining on the skirts. But that is what it is. The rear side, though, does have some neat etched-in details, so since these are like solid parts, there's not an extra piece that kind of fills in this gap. You can, you know, paint this whatever color, metallic, if you want to, and then there's like some detail you can dry brush into it. The front skirts, I think, have an additional plate that snaps on here. I could be mistaken. I think it might just be something that snaps in here with a poly cap, but it could be an entire plate. I really don't remember. The C runner has some torso parts. These are the floor and back panel for the cockpit. These are part of the torso the arms dock into. You can see there's some cables and conduits and raised detailing in there that looks really neat. There's kind of some, maybe some hydraulic canisters or something. And some interesting greedly techy details. These are for the lower legs. These are where the outside panels of the lower legs, where the power cables plug into. This is the back panel under the backpack. The backpack on the Zaku is really interesting. It's not a single unit. It's like 2 side-by-side rocket motors that like hinge onto this and then are covered by a single backpack cover. It's really neat. Probably once I finish this, I'll do an assembled model review. This is a kind of a vent, I think, that fits under the center codpiece in the waist. Part of the cockpit hatch. It's kind of a frame that the cockpit hatch opens into. There's some additional venting stuff here, more parts for the backpack, obviously the frame insert for the shield. And I believe this is the pilot's main view screen. Yeah, I believe this pegs into the main cockpit door. So this is the O runner. Has the ring of cartridges for the drum magazine. There are 27 shells molded onto this ring. Yes, I just counted. Plus there is an additional single cartridge. I'm not really sure why, but it's there. The 120 millimeter scale cartridges. They look a little small for 120 millimeter, honestly, because at 60th scale, 120 mil, I feel like should be bigger than that, but I don't know. I can't do math right now. In addition, here's power cable for the Heat Hawk axe and some shoulder joint parts. The B2 runner. This is purely the backpack cover. There's a hydraulic unit that fits underneath, and then kind of a hinge. The whole thing can lift up, and you can get a look at the thruster unit under the backpack. It's pretty neat. There's some cool panel lining on the top here, but otherwise the sides are pretty sparse. The F runner has some torso frame parts and some lower waist parts. This is like the main frame for how the torso fits together. And then this is, so the cockpit would like fit inside this large open cavity. In fact, there's a couple of molded view screens on here on both sides. This was actually designed in this way to kind of address an animation quirk from the original series. I may have talked about this in another Zaku video for a different model before, but in the first or second episode, the Zaku is depicted as having the cockpit on the right side, like the door that opens is on the right side of the chest, or the left side of the chest. But when Amuro stabs the Zaku through the cockpit, he stabs the other side of the chest and kills the pilot. So to address that, this Zaku Perfect Grade model has the opening hatch on the left side of the chest, but the seat can slide back and forth, and then the view screen is on the right side of the chest. It's really kind of silly. That's always struck me as a very unusual design, but I guess they just really wanted to address that animation quirk. In addition, you got a ball joint for the heat hawk, so it can pose in the hand. You got a peg. It's got a peg on it, so it slots into the hand. Also, the peg slot for the machine gun. This is part, I believe, of the hinge system for the backpack. Like I said, this is the lower waist. There's some mechanical stuff where the legs would peg into, and that vent I said, and I think on one of the earlier runners that fits under the center codpiece would peg into right here. This, I believe, fits inside this. This is like the ab crunch mechanism. There's some more jointing here. I believe these are from some conduits on the lower legs. Some shoulder joint stuff, front skirt armor stuff. I believe this is for a hydraulic system, like simulated hydraulic system on the skirt. I believe it's designed to have a little bit of bounce. And I think that goes with this here. This is another part here for the ab crunch system. I believe this, and all of this kind of sandwiches together. And then this is kind of a slip-out unit that the side skirt's attached to. It kind of pegs over top of this post, so it all slides together. But yeah, there's some really neat molded detail on a lot of this stuff, like some linkages and stuff. It would have been pretty easy for Bandai to actually do as, like, if they were doing this now, these probably would have all been separate parts instead of just, you know, sandwiched together with a polycap. Like, these would have all linkages, but it would have been separate parts, and it would have been very fiddly and finicky, but it would have been a lot of fun to build. Okay, this is the M2 runner. We got some leg armor parts, upper thigh, all around. Basically, these are the outsides where the cables plug into. These are the insides of the thighs. These are the front and back parts. And this is the rear part of the lower leg. This panel has like kind of a slide out, kind of a block. So the whole thing lifts up from the back of the leg and then hinges open so you can get a look underneath. And there's big cutouts for the thrusters. There's also the pilot figure here. In fact, this section is different from how the Shaw Zaku is going to be later on. This part would have been gated off on his, and then this part would have been gated open, which has his pilot figure as well as two slightly different, I say slightly different, they're actually very, very different lower legs with bigger thruster units in them. Same with the skirt armors. There's like molded structural ribbing and stuff underneath here, which is something Bandai doesn't really do very much anymore, which is kind of a bummer. Pilot figure actually looks pretty good though. I might be able to make that out. It seems to be molded with the visor open. You can actually kind of make out his face a little bit. This is the Eye Runner, which I believe is the first one that we've had a look at that is not in styrene. This is in ABS. This is around the time when Bandai was first starting to experiment with ABS. They hadn't really done much with ABS before now. But you've got the feet, you've got the lower leg frames, and I believe these kind of peg around, kind of layers up the armor. It's kind of neat. There's some panels we looked at earlier that would then peg on top of these. So you've got like multiple layers of structure on top of just the basic leg frame. Then you've got your inner leg blocks for the knees. The poly caps would fit inside these, and then there would be additional detail parts that would fit over top. These would be where the feet actually peg into. I believe these fit on this peg right here on either leg, and then the foot has a peg on another pin right here that would plug into this hole, and it would give you that full, realistic 360-degree in every direction movement. In addition, I believe these are for the front skirts. There's a poly cap that fits inside this frame, and then pegs ball and socket onto the waist assembly. The S-Runner. This is primarily all of your hydraulic cylinders. Whole bunch of them. A lot of singles, a lot of doubles. Stuff for the arms, stuff for the legs. I believe this is for the skirt armor. I think, if memory serves, there's supposed to be a spring that gets captured in between. I think one actually might be for the front, one might be for the back, because I think they're independently sprung. And yeah, as memory serves, there's a spring that gets captured in between these with a chrome piston, so it can kind of have a little bit of realistic bounce. In theory, realistic. Yeah, they're all done with open slide molds, so, I don't know if I've ever really explained how a slide mold works. I don't know if that's the proper term. That's just the term that I know and I'm familiar with. But the two halves of the clamshell mold, and then a rod, in this case, would be inserted from the side. Like, there'd be an open gap on the side of the mold, and a rod would come in and would keep these ends open as the cavities are filled with molten plastic. It's a really neat way of doing things. Hey, we got the A runner. So we got the shield, we got the armor parts for the feet, we've got the head panel, the center panel for the head, which has the option for the commander's antenna or the standard grunt. There's an additional little, crescent moon shaped piece that fits into a gap right there, because it wouldn't have been possible to mold this and have that solid, so they just included a second little piece. There's also the main two halves of the head. There's the little woo-woo vent mouth panel that fits on the back. Shoulder spikes, which I always like to try to sharpen if I can. And then the armor panels for the backs of the hands. They got a big cutout in there so the hands can actually flex back and forth, which is something that the RX-78 could not do. Its hands were just ball jointed onto the wrist, and all it could do was just kind of that. So this one can actually like full flex, which I remember being very exciting. So you can get some more dynamic rifle poses out of the hands like that. God, I love purple. This is the Heat Hawk frame. I mentioned before there's a peg on a ball joint that sockets right into there and then gets clamshelled in between this. The blade itself is a separate part. We'll take a look at that later. And then there's the cord that just goes from here to here. Not really sure why. It's an exposed kind of fragile component that doesn't really... Why? But whatever, it is what it is. There's an option kit that you can get that includes an actual light-up Heat Hawk. It's about maybe 5% larger than this one is, and has like a tiny little battery inside it. It's about 2 to 3 millimeters in diameter and about maybe 2 centimeters long with a little pin on the end of it. And there's like an array of LEDs that fit inside the handle, or inside the blade housing. And it's really super neat. I have had one before. I don't know what happened to it. It probably got lost at one point during one of my many moves over my lifetime. But it was really cool, and those accessory sets are very, very hard to come by. Bandai, please reissue them. I want a weapon set, because they also come with like the leg missiles, like the missile pods that strap onto the legs, the Sturmfaust rockets, as well as the bazookas. And there's also a couple of sets for the RX-78 as well. Not to mention, they come with between the two sets for each, the Zakus and the RX-78, they have a complete set of transparent armor. So you can display the naked frame with still having armor on it. It's kind of neat. And last up for weapons, This is the rifle. This is the complete rifle. Only part that's missing are just the clear lenses for the scope and the actual bullets. So you got your two left-right halves, you got your forward aiming handle, you got your ammo drum, which has a little handle molded onto it. Not a useful handle, but it's there. As well, the ammo channel is molded as open. So if you've got this thing assembled and you've got all your cartridges painted, you can actually see one through that gap. It's kind of neat. And then the barrel itself. It's also missing a couple polycaps as well as the peg for the hand. So it's not fully complete, but it's basically complete. The scope is 4 parts, not counting the lens. So you got the front opening lens, you got the main body, and then the, I believe the subjective lens, the side that the operator would look through. I think the objective and subjective, I think. I could be mistaken. I probably got that backwards, and my girlfriend is going to be mad at me. Incidentally, I'm noticing a very tiny little piece of flash right there. I would say that's disappointing, but this is a 20-year-old mold. I can't complain too much. This is the first bit of flash I've seen on the entire thing. And it's so very fine. I mean, there, I just took it off with my fingers. And, yeah, I can't complain. You know, for as much use as these have gotten, I think it's fine that there is a tiny little bit there. The L Runner has the main armor parts for the front of the legs. It's a big cutout here where that lift-up armor panel would be. The power cables would plug into here, so this would be the outside of the leg, this would be the inside of the leg. There's a panel line here where there could be an opening panel. I've always thought about cutting one of these open and just kind of maybe adding a little extra thruster inside, because some of the other, like the Master Grade Zaku variants, often have a thruster here. I believe even some of the real grade versions do as well. Yes, I'm looking at my real grade Zakus right now, and yes, they do have thrusters there. So, yeah, it's kind of a bummer that they didn't include those, but whatever. The W Runner. It's not often I get up into the Ws. Mostly arm stuff. Shoulder outer frames, inner mechanisms. I believe this is just kind of a detail part for inside the forearm. These are the forearms themselves, which I really love these designs. They really look like, you know, they look like they were adapted almost from like a backhoe. Like they're just chunky plate steel welded together with like reinforcements. I really dig it. Some upper arm parts. I believe part of the elbows. Not really sure what some of the rest of these are. I think it's just a lot of inserts and just shifting armor parts. I believe these are parts of the shoulder as it attaches to the body of the mobile suit. Yeah. But yeah, like these forearms especially, if you leave the armors off of them, they look super neat. Everyone's favorite part of any Zaku. This is the T Runner. These are all the cylinders for all the power cables. And they're all a huge pain in the ass. Because there's so many of them, and they've all got to be trimmed up and cleaned up, and the, you know, nubs all cleaned up, and it takes forever. It is such a tedious process. You got to make sure you don't lose any of them, and then stringing them onto the spring to actually mount them is a pain, and blah 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 blah. It's aggravating, but you can't argue with the results. The way that these are done is they've got a bit of weight to them. They're very very solid, and when you've got all of them attached together on the spring and attached to the head or the waist, they've got kind of a natural realistic sag to them. There's enough friction between like joints, like between two parts, like this ball and the socket on the next one. There's enough friction that you can kind of pose them where you want them and they'll stay there. In addition, if you wanted to, you could put like a wire inside and give it a bit more of a stiffness, but just out of the box, they look pretty good. But there are very many of them and they're very annoying to deal with. But they do give you a few spares. As memory serves, they always give you a couple of extras of each type in case you lose one, in case you break one, in case you completely ruin it. So you never have to worry too much about running out. This is runner E2. I think this is the only runner that's basically unique to this version. I mean, this bit here is shared across both Zakus. This is, I think, supposed to be the reactor. This is some venting for the thrusters, and then the thruster motors on the bottom of the feet. But all of this stuff is all different from Shaw's. This is the back panel for the rear lower legs, the rocket motors for the backpack. You can see they're kind of like two halves, like almost look like modern rocket engines. It's kind of cool. And they just, like, these two peg together and then have one thruster attached to them, and they just ball joint up and down independently of each other. Like, there's no hinge between the rocket motor and the actual rocket body. All of the hinging is done between the rocket body and the mobile suit body. It's really kind of an unusual design, and I really like it. In addition, here are the 4 smaller thrusters for the lower leg and some additional detail parts, I think, that peg onto the rocket motor. The center box, like I said, this is roughly the size of a typical master grade box. I really like this art. This is the first box art you would really see. Same with the RX-78 that we talked about earlier in the Perfect Grade project. It's the first you would see the assembled model when you would buy one of these. Sides, though, don't really have anything interesting on them, except it says version 1.0. That's interesting. They were using the 1.0, 2.0 nomenclature way back in 1999. Alright, we're getting into the more greebly stuff. Sticker set. It's all self-adhesive, clear-backed. Same with the RX-78. Very disappointing that they didn't do them in water slide or even dry transfer, but whatever, it is what it is. You got your eye lens, you got model numbers, unit marking numbers. There's a standard 500071 unit number, or you can make your own numbers. Then there's your no-step markings and thruster markings, and then your caliber, etc., etc. All of the, you know, Zaku and Xeon logos, etc. Wire, couple of springs, and an LED. So the LED obviously is for the main camera in the head. It lights up red. The wire, I was kind of surprised when I built my first one that it had any wire at all, because the RX-78 didn't. It had a self-contained battery pack that plugged into the head, and the contacts were made by metal springs, essentially. But this one, it does have a couple of metal contacts, but the wire has to run from the base unit in the bottom of the head up to the eye, so it's a little bit more difficult because the eye itself has to move. Yeah, it's kind of neat once it's assembled if you have the whole thing working, which I remember being very finicky to get working, but once it's lit, it looks pretty cool. The springs, I believe, are probably for the front and rear skirt armor shock absorber system. Speaking of metal contacts, I think we got one right here for the eye. In addition, a bunch of black screws for presumably structural jointing here and there in the body. We got another metal contact right here, and a bunch more screws. These are all very, very short. I hope I can identify which one is which in the instructions. I remember it being a real pain in the ass to figure that all out. And another metal contact, and some more screws. These screws are a little bigger than the last batch. I would guess... I seem to remember the silver screws being used for the... because they make better contact than the black ones do. So they were better used for the light system. I mean, you would only need 2 or maybe 3 screws for that, so the rest of these I'm not sure where they would go, but... certainly a couple of these or a couple of the last batch would be used for that. And we got another metal contact and a bunch more screws. I think these ones, again, are a little bit bigger than the last black screws. Yeah, they're thicker gauge and a bit longer. Yeah, so there's a lot of screws in this thing. There's also a single foil-backed sticker. This is for around the eye, so it captures and doesn't allow the light to escape. So you'd actually put this around the clear lens. I'll paint it because obviously I don't like using stickers if I can avoid it. But yeah, this is the only foil-back sticker in the set. And then we got our springs for the power cables. This big fat long one is for the waist, the skinnier long one is for the head, and then the two shorter ones are for the leg. You would take a screw on either end and thread it into the spring. Then you would feed all of your the beads over the cable, and then put a screw in the other end, and that keeps tension on the spring and allows a little bit of bounce. It's kind of cool the way it works. Back to actual parts again. This is the R runner. You can see it is chromed. I don't like chrome. I've said it many times, and I will continue to say it. I don't like chrome. I bought a product the other day that I hope is going to work to strip this stuff. I'm going to strip all of the chrome from all of my Perfect Grade kits. And I think I have a couple of Master Grade kits that have a little bit of chrome on them as well. And then I'm just going to airbrush them with some Alclad chrome. I think I have some kicking around over here. Yeah, I'll have to dig around for it. The famous system injection runner. Here we've got mechanical joint parts. I believe these are for the hips. They're very similar to what the RX-78 had on its hips and shoulders. But I remember these being a little less finicky. On the RX-78, they were very, very stiff. I think these move a little more smoothly. In addition, you've got all of your fingers and your thumb. And unlike the RX-78, again, which its fingers were very squared off, these are kind of round and sausage fingery, which I kind of really like because, you know, it's a little bit different and they're a little more distinctive. But yeah, it's just ball joint at the base, very simple, with two hinge knuckles on each finger. The thumb has a ball joint at the base and a ball joint at the second knuckle, and then a hinge at the tip. The K-runner is almost entirely foot parts. You've got your front pad, and then the heel block itself, and the front main structure. These have polycaps that peg in on the foot frame, so they've got quite a bit of side-to-side motion. Even when the armor panel is attached, they've still got quite a bit of float to them. So there's some flexibility there that I really enjoy. You've got your kneecaps, your elbow caps, your central chest plate and cockpit hatch. Like I said earlier on, there's the cutout on the left side of the chest for the cockpit door. So that part lifts up, but the entire thing can hinge down on a peg right here. So that view screen would peg in right there, and then the whole thing can fold down, and you can actually see the interior of the cockpit. There's not really much to see, though. It's very, very plain. The inside of the kneecaps, though, as well as the inside of the cockpit, have some molded detail. There's kind of a hydraulic thing in there, as well as some structural ribbing in the knees. The Q runner is our clear runner. You've got the clear armor plate for the eye, which I always leave off. I find it looks kind of silly. You've got the eye lens itself, the lenses for the rifle, and then for some reason they molded the blade for the Heat Hawk in clear. That always struck me as weird. It looks kind of neat. Like, it gives you the option if you want to paint it like chrome in the back and then like bright clear red or something, make it look like it's lit, but I kind of wish they had given you two different parts, like one opaque and one clear, and then like giving you the option to like switch them out on the fly. Because you very easily can swap the part out. Like, it's designed to be sandwiched in place, but you can kind of trim out the back side of this and take off part of this peg, and you can just slip it in and out, which is kind of essential if you want to actually paint the thing, because you can deal with the seam on the Heat Hawk, then you have this sandwiched in between. Then what are you going to do? I mean, you can mask it, but why do that when you can just detach the blade? But yeah, when you look at it from the front, like, it looks kind of really weird and really neat, and I kind of like it, but it's silly and strange, and I don't really understand why they just did it purely in clear. But, it is what it is. We're getting into the end here. We're up to the letter U. Shoulder pauldron, forearm armor, upper arm shoulder armor, elbow blocks. This is a folding armor panel that I really enjoy on the elbow. It pegs in between the two halves of the forearm, and when the forearm armor is in place, when the elbow bends, it slides under right here into this little gap underneath. It's really neat. But yeah, this is all purely arm stuff. Some panel lining on the shoulders, a little bit of detail on the left shoulder pauldron. If this were done now, it probably would have been done as a single piece without the bases for the spikes molded in place. They probably would have been left off, much like they do with the real grade and the master grade version 2.0. It would have been a single complete unit, so you wouldn't have that big seam to deal with. Incidentally, I just saw a bit of flash on the runner itself, but I don't see any on any parts, so that's fine. Runner N, this is all in ABS. You've got your upper leg, you've got the base for the head. This is where the battery and all the contacts would run, and then the wire would run up into the head from inside here. There's a bit of a collar neck piece, and there's some mechanical linkages and stuff that fit in there, and then the head itself is right here. So there's kind of some detail in here that looks really neat, and then the eye itself would sit on this peg and can go back and forth, and then there's another little geared system right here, so you can swing this back and forth. It would fit right there, and move the eye back and forth kind of remotely. The two batteries, I think they're LR43 maybe? Yeah, 1.5 volt 2X LR43 would fit into here. So I need to get some of those. Yeah, this would be the deck actually that the LED fits on. So it would slot into this space right here, and then the clear lens fits over top. The wires would run down through the center through the head, through the hole in the center of the head, down into the collar, into the battery case. So yeah, there's no interference from the wires, and it all seems to work pretty effectively. As long as you can make proper contact with the wires and all the metal contact pieces, which I remember being a little bit finicky, but I was always able to make it work after a little bit of futzing. The J runner, got the frames for the hands. I believe this is the actual attachment point for the hand. It would peg into this little slot and then get sandwiched in by the armor plate. There's additionally a palm detail plate, which is kind of cool. So yeah, you would peg the fingers in with the armor plate on the back, and then this would attach the thumb, and it would lock in together there. You've got more parts for the hips. There's some mechanical conduit detailing spring stuff on the leg. The blocks for the knees. Like there's a structural block that these fit over, and these are just the detail parts. I believe these are what the feet peg into. This is a structural part, holds the the left shoulder pauldron together. I believe this is the actual pegs that the arms attach to on the body. And then this is the holster for the heat hawk. Instead of the heat hawk itself just having a peg on it that fits onto the body of the mobile suit, or there being just a simple clip like the real grade, and I believe the master grade 2.0 has. This actually has a really neat cradle. So it clamps around the body of the heat hawk, and then the blade area kind of rests right here, and then this pegs into the skirt. It's really neat. But yeah, this is all styrene, so it's not structural stuff for the most part. And last but not least, Runner P. This is our polycap set. And like the RX-78, there is an awful lot of them. They're numbered 1 through 50. And like the RX-78, there's a lot of several of them. There's 4 of number 15, there's 2 of 14, there's 4 of 13, there's 4 of 50, there's 4 of 47. So there's probably about 150, if not 200-ish polycaps on this runner. And because it's specifically designed, it says specifically PG 160 MS-06S, this was not a repurposed runner. There's a lot of these, and they all get used. So, yeah. I'm not too disappointed that Bandai has kind of moved away from using polycaps as much as they used to. You know, when I did my Perfect Grade Unicorn, I think it had like half this many polycaps, and it is a way more complicated model. So, yeah, that is it for structural parts. Like the RX-78 and all of the Perfect Grades up to, as far as I know, up to at least the Astray, comes with 2 books. You got your instruction manual and your construction manual. We'll start with the instructions first. This is like the RX-78. It's just kind of a, instead of having box art or like a center section like a master grade kit would have, this has like a whole additional booklet kind of detailing, you know, the history of the model, you know, the features of the model, and then kind of the history of the mobile suit itself, the technology used and the development of it, because it's especially, I really wish I could read Japanese, but it'd be especially interesting because the Zaku was the first really effective combat mobile suit, so all of this would be like very ground up kind of engineering and design stuff. So you got some photoshopped photos of the Zakus with in front of a space colony in combat, some Zakus stored in a hangar, and then just some additional shots in combat. Here's one undergoing maintenance of a sort, just some squad details and whatnot. And then your back page is marking and color guide. So there's a couple of different color options. I believe this is Shin Matsunaga's colors, and this is Johnny Ridden's colors. But you've got your standard colorway for the standard version. Backside has a really cool photo of the Zaku in side 7, as it would have appeared at the first or second episode, looking over the Gundam as it's laying on its trailer. The construction manual, instead of having the same photo, I believe the RX-78 manual had the same photo. This one has it with some hatches open. So you can see these panels on the shoulders open up, the panel on the top of the head opens up, the power cable is detached, and the cockpit hatch is open. Got your parts callouts. Because all the runners for this thing are purpose-made for it, there would be no X's. Nothing would be X'd out anywhere. Construction starts with the head, and you can see this is how it recommends you do the power cable. So you screw you thread a screw into the spring, and then you pull it taut, and then spring on all of the conduit segments in the proper order. There's a joint section in the middle, and then you thread on a screw on the other end, and then it just pegs into the head. This also explains how all the wiring works and how all the different parts for the switch and the batteries and everything, how it all goes together. Assembly continues with the arm and shoulders, then onto the hand frame, then application of the armor, and then onto the legs. Again, like the arm, it starts with the frame and then application of the armor last. And then moving on to the torso, which, yeah, because of that weird animation quirk, because they kept that seat able to slide back and forth, the cockpit in the chest is just super open, and it always struck me as really silly. Like, it's just like a big open room. In terms of square footage, it would be like 15 feet by 10 foot, which is actually probably bigger than my room in camp where I'm living when I'm at work, which is kind of hilarious. And then assembly of the rocket motors for the backpack. Center or lower abdomen. You can see this is like one of the skirt armor spring section, so you can see the metal, or there's a metal spring here that's kind of pinned in between the two halves with a piston on both front and back, so the whole thing can kind of spring up and down a little bit. And then, yeah, that's completed assembly with the weapons and the Heat Hawk. And then the back is just the same in, I would say grayscale, but green scale photo of the Zaku overlooking the RX-78. So that is the Perfect Grade Zaku MS-06F. So, yeah, it's been a while since I've built one of these Zakus. I think the last one I did was circa 2003 or so. Maybe a little more recently than that. No later than about 2005. So it's been a while. It's really interesting going back and looking at some of these older Perfect Grades, like so long after they've come out. When I mean, I took a big long break from Perfect Grades after the Strike and the Strike Rouge. I mean, I did do the Estray, but I mean, it's a retool of the Strike anyway, so it's kind of the same model with some slightly different parts. But then when I built the Unicorn last year, that was just such a leap forward, because I hadn't been keeping up on what was going on in between. So, you know, seeing all of these new techniques that are used in it compared to what I was used to, it was pretty radical. But going back to the start and doing these from the beginning is really neat as well, because you can kind of trace that evolution of design and see what techniques that worked well that they were later able to miniaturize and implement in master grade and later real grade models. In fact, I mean, some techniques they've been able to implement in high grade Universal Century models, you know, such as like the miniaturized inner frame and polycapless design, and yeah, just Bandai has come so far in the last 20 years. It's astonishing. I really can't get over what they've been able to accomplish. So kudos to them for that. We're going to take a break from the Perfect Grade project for a few days. When we get to the Commander type Zaku in a few days, I'm only going to kind of do a quick overview of what's different. Not going to go into as much detail as I usually do. I'm just going to kind of quickly go over the specific differences. Different parts colors, and, you know, what parts are different versus which parts are original, which are shared, etc. Just going to be very, very quick and just kind of bam, 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 get it done. But yeah, I'm excited to take a look at that one as well, because I do love the Shah Aznable color scheme. We're going to take a look at something a little different tomorrow. We're going to peek at Bandai's EX model series, which I feel like I've done a review of, an unboxing of the white base, and I think that's it. That was probably a couple of years ago. But the EX model series are really interesting. They're different, and they're unique, and they're a lot of fun. And I'm eager to crack one open. So stay tuned for that. Thank you everyone out there for watching, and happy modeling.